Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to I Care About You, the podcast where we sit with hard things, the emotions we don't always want to face, the questions that keep us up at night. For me, that's like 3 a.m. We try to find meaning and purpose in just what all of that is telling us in our lives. As many of you know, I'm Juliana J, and in today's episode, we look into anger. Super juicy topic. And the purpose of it, and how we feel about it, and how we can use anger in a different way, to better our lives. We're looking through the lens of mindfulness, drawing on Sharon Salzberg's Real Change, Mindfulness to Heal Ourselves and the World. I recently read this book along with her other book entitled Loving Kindness, The Revolutionary Art of Happiness. And I'll link both of those in the description if you're interested. The books were amazing. And it really, really helped me to understand things like, what is the purpose of anger? What are all the emotions around anger? How is it a positive thing in my life? And this loving kindness stuff, how do you be that as a people pleaser, but still maintain your own boundaries? And we'll talk a lot more about that. Today, we're talking about the aspects of anger. And I want to ask you a few really important questions. What if anger isn't the enemy we often think it is? What if its purpose, if we can meet it with awareness rather than be consumed by it, what is its purpose? Why is it a thing? I have always thought that anger was bad and wrong. I always felt like I was just being really low vibe when I was angry, and I felt a lot of guilt and shame around any anger that I had. And as an abuse survivor, I am also afraid of anger. So whenever I'm met with anger, I just go into this fight or flight situation, and I'm really uncomfortable with it. And Sharon helped me understand exactly why anger is there in the first place. So what is anger, and why do we shy away from it? Anger is a natural human emotion, I want to say, first and foremost. It often arises when we feel a boundary has been violated, when fairness is threatened, when there's an injustice, when we feel vulnerable, and sometimes when we feel helpless. Sharon reminds us that anger tends to show up when we feel weak and powerless, or when we perceive that something deeply matters. It isn't from nowhere. It bubbles up from grief, fear, frustration, and disappointment. This really hit home for me because so much of my anger is really about my vulnerability. And I never really thought of that before. So I've been kind of dealing for the last couple of years with a relationship that's ending, a relationship I've had for a long, long time, and it's morphing into something else. And it's painful. There's a lot of pain and anger around that. And I feel like I've spent over a year being angry about what could have been, what should have been, what the other person should have done, what I myself should have done, how I could have handled it better, how the other person could have handled it better, how even with just 4 degrees of shift, things would have been 100% better. And man, I was consumed with the anger around all of it. Why couldn't that person just do that? Why couldn't this just happen? Why? And I had a lot of sadness around it and grief, which part of grieving is anger. And I was starting to feel like there's no way to get out of being angry about this situation. Am I going to be angry about it for the rest of my life? Which some people are. I've seen a lot of people come out of divorces and relationship endings, and they're angry and bitter, and they stay that way for decades. And I didn't want that to be me. So why are so many of us afraid of anger? Why are we running from anger? Why are we suppressing it? Why are we just so incredibly uncomfortable with it all the time? And I think a lot of it is because of how destructive anger can become when unexamined. It can burn us out. It can damage relationships. It can lead to impulsive speech and action. It can lead to a way of being where people don't want to be around you anymore. And being in the space of anger that you never resolve or work through can change your whole reality. We all know people who live in this reality of anger Anger's always on the surface. They're mad at everybody. Everyone's out to get them. You can't drive in the car with them without them exploding about something. It just is really damaging. It's hard to be around that person. It damages their relationships. It makes it impossible to get into a deeper relationship with the person. It's harder to find commonality with the person if you're trying to live a different kind of life. And it can be super damaging on your relationships. Also, anger is really put in a box culturally, socially. Our culture defines it as something that is not positive or that certain people don't have privy to experience or be like. And emotion in general is stigmatized. We learn that being calm and nice is so much better than being angry. Angry is bad. And that if you're angry, you're wrong, you're unloving, you're a hateful person. And that has to do a lot with how we've been taught to engage with anger or relate to anger or think about anger. And the other thing about anger is it's really uncomfortable. The bodily sensations, the racing thoughts, the sense of loss of control, how it consumes your mind with just going over and over and over and over a scenario that you're upset and angry about. It's really uncomfortable space to be. But here's the turning point. Suppressing anger doesn't resolve the underlying issue. It often just buries it. Setting up a pressure cooker or giving rise later to resentment, bitterness, or worse, real change invites us instead to bring a mindful attention to the anger, to see what we can learn from it. And that's really what I got out of Sharon's books, is that anger serves a purpose. We don't live there. That's not the purpose of anger, is to go there and live there, like folks who can't get over relationship breakups and things like that. We don't live there. You don't live there and have it become a lifestyle. It's a tool. It's telling you something. It's there for you to stop and self-reflect. So how do you bring mindfulness to anger? How do you do the self-reflection stuff? What practices or shifts does Sharon offer or that arise in real change that can help us use anger in service of growth, clarity, and of action rather than letting it overwhelm us? And here are some of the key takeaways I got. 1, recognize and honor the feeling. The first step is not to judge yourself for being angry. Sharon emphasizes we have to honor how we feel. And that's really hard for a lot of us, especially if we grew up thinking we were not allowed to have all the emotions. We were just supposed to be seen and not heard, only kind and loving and giving, and there was no other things that we could be, or that there was no emotions at all that should ever be expressed. So we tend to think our emotions, we feel bad about it, right? We feel a little bit of shame around certain emotions. And the first step is just not to judge. The judgment is what brings the shame. The first thought is to just honor how you feel, like, wow, I'm feeling angry right now. I'm pretty upset. I'm very angry. How does this feel? Really acknowledge it. It feels like this pit in my stomach. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I feel so angry I can't even make sense of my thoughts. And acknowledge its presence. Acknowledge that anger is there. You can even say to yourself, anger is here. Notice where it is in your body. Like I said, is your heart pounding? Is there tightness in your chest? Is there heat somewhere? Are you clenching your jaw or your hands? Do you feel that pit in your stomach? What thoughts accompany it? Observe without getting lost in your anger. Instead of being caught in the story, they're wrong, they hurt me, they should apologize, whatever the story is, shift to noticing, what is anger? What do I feel? What are the physical sensations? What is the mental chatter? That mental chatter is they were wrong, they hurt me, or I'm really mad at myself that I did this, that was so stupid, and launching into all this negative self-talk about yourself. Try to just go, what is this anger? What do I feel? What are the sensations in my body? And what is my mental chatter? You're just noticing it at this point. You aren't riding the wave of anger, just going, oh, I'm really angry. Why am I angry? How do I feel right now? what is the mental chatter? What is the talk in my mind? You might even journal that down if you can. If something's made you mad and you have a moment to reflect on it, you're not in this conversation. You might just do some free flow writing and see what comes up for you, because a lot of times anger is really just pulling up a negative self belief that we have that makes us feel vulnerable, worthless, dumb, whatever our negative self talk is. This space between feeling and reaction is central. This is key to the whole thing. If you can stop in between the feeling and the reaction, that's where there is time to really make a change with your anger. Mindfulness gives us the gap where choice is possible. Now, how many times have you been really angry and you've said things that you regret later? Or you fire off an email and then you regret it? That's what I'm talking about here. If you can put a space between this feeling of anger and what you do next, you can make more thoughtful decisions about what you're going to do. You're not just reacting. You're shifting how you show up in the world so that you're not just reacting to all the stimuli that comes your way or your own feelings, but you're working on a way to pause for a minute and decide for yourself how you're going to react. Look what's underneath. Often under the anger is helplessness, grief, fear, betrayal. Part of mindfulness is discovering what is driving your anger. Sharon says anger often arises when we feel weak. We pick up anger because it seems stronger and more active. Now, flip this on somebody you know who's often very, very angry, and you have to deal with them. You can see that they pick up anger because it makes them feel more powerful, stronger. And underneath that is probably these feelings of weakness, or they're not good enough, or all types of negative self talk is underneath the people who are just angry right away at every single thing. They don't feel comfortable. They feel weak and helpless, and anger makes them feel stronger and more powerful. And the same is true for you and me. Anger gives you more power in the moment. When we allow ourselves to see that, it softens. Not necessarily the intensity immediately, but the sharp edges start to dull. So, what I mean here is if we can see what's driving our anger, what are the stories behind the anger? Why'd you get angry in the first place? Have you ever noticed that some people get really angry at certain things and other people, it doesn't affect them at all? That's because the anger is touching the story that you have, the narrative that you have. It's poking at it. And some people don't have that narrative, so they're not angry at it. So, anger is this warning sign. What's underneath? What's there? What stories are attached to that? What's going on that I think I'm so angry about this? For me, in this relationship I was talking about earlier, one of the main things that makes it that I get angry about, that I'm so angry about in this relationship, is that the person spent a lot of time making me feel like I didn't matter and that I was invisible. My thoughts were never validated, accomplishments not really validated. The person never really listened to me, and after decades of knowing me, still knew absolutely nothing about me because they never committed any of it to memory, and that made me feel worthless, unloved, invisible. And those are all things I struggle with within myself, of feeling like what I have to say matters and that I am worthy and I'm smart. And that's what I realized. Like, I'm so angry because I spent decades in a relationship that was making me feel small and invisible. Mindfulness doesn't mean passivity. I want to talk about cultivating boundaries and agency. A lot of people think mindfulness means you're just totally passive at everything and you're in the lotus position and you're always in love with the world and all these kinds of things. And that's not what it is. I don't have time to get into mindfulness today, and that would really be probably a, a separate podcast in itself that would have its own life. But a lot of us think that a mindfulness person is somebody who's just completely passive. One of Sharon's points is that though through awareness, we can choose a response instead of reacting impulsively. Even small steps matter. A call, a conversation, a small action aligned with values. You take action. You're not passive. And the action might be to do nothing, like I'm going to let this one go, or I was mad just because I was really hungry, or whatever it is. You can decide to let it go, but you can also decide on what your next step is, your reaction is going to be, but not in an impulsive way, in a thoughtful way where you've thought it all out and you've figured out like how you're going to proceed forward. Also, boundaries, knowing what we can do, what is within the scope of our control and what's not. So we don't exhaust ourselves. This was something I did a lot in this relationship, was just kept pounding against the wall of trying to be seen and heard. And it never went anywhere. And I kept thinking that I had control over that, but I didn't. The other person had control over that. If they weren't going to let me in, then I can't do anything about that. So the boundaries come into play here when we think about what we can do, what is possible, what is in our purview, and what is not. And then finding a way to be okay with what is not. Here is a really pivotal thing. Turn anger into courageous action. Instead of being stuck in rage, transform the energy into something meaningful. Sharon highlights activists and caregivers who have done this, where anger becomes the fuel for change, for speaking out, for compassion and action. She has so many fantastic stories about people who used anger to create change within their environment, within their culture, within their world, within the government, all different facets within their own lives, and how they used anger as the fuel for their actions. They didn't sit there and seep in it and be mad and yell at the news and all of that. They used it as the fuel to go out and do something about it. They're really great stories. Well, but that action is most sustainable when it's rooted in mindfulness, compassion, and clarity. So, what I mean here is even though you are turning your anger into the change that you want or you would like, that action is most sustainable when it's rooted in mindfulness, compassion, and clarity. When you move forward and you're rooted in this taking a pause between the next thing that makes you angry about the situation and how you're going to handle that, when you have compassion, Sharon talks a lot about sometimes you can't have compassion for the other person because loving awareness just is really a hard practice sometimes, but you can have compassion for yourself. You can have compassion for other people who might be experiencing this negative situation too. And if you learn to pause between the emotion and the action, you can seek better clarity about exactly what is going on. And as I mentioned, it's really important to have self-compassion along the way. Recognize that anger is messy, that we all make mistakes, practice kindness towards yourself when anger leads you astray. You don't have to beat yourself up about it when you feel angry. That only compounds the suffering. So before I get into it even more so, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsors. First up, we have Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth's luxurious bamboo bedding and pajamas, loved by Oprah and Kris Jenner and thousands of customers, offer the ultimate softness and cooling and comfort. Enjoy an exclusive discount with my promo code ICAREABOUTYOU at CozyEarth.com. Get 41% off everything using the I Care About You promo code. It's really some beautiful products there. And Zevo Life. Are you looking for a game-changing way to improve your health? Get 30% off using the promo code ICAREABOUTYOU. Zevo Life is the world's most nutrient-dense whole plant product, packed with over 50% plant protein, essential amino acids, fiber, and antioxidants. Just 1 teaspoon a day supports your gut, boosts your energy, and promotes healthier skin and hair. No wonder it's receiving its rave 5-star reviews. Get ready to feel a difference because you will. Visit zevo.life and start your journey today with a 30-day risk-free guarantee. All of those links in the promo code will be in the description. So now let's talk about some real life, drawing real change from other sources to see what this practice really looks like. Sharon Salzberg writes about Malika Dutt, an activist who saw so much suffering, particularly violence towards women in the world, and she felt rage and frustration about it. In her case, the rage stirred a sense of overwhelm about how to respond. What allowed her to stay with that was recognizing that she felt bringing meditation into her response and choosing actions consistent with her values. So, what she did here was she took a pause. She applied practices in meditation to her response and choosing actions that were consistent with her values. This is another thing I think that's really important. When you put your anger into action, when you talk about your response, make sure your response is consistent with your own values and guiding principles. You're not going to lie or be deceitful or say things that are untrue if they're not consistent with your own values. If one of your values is truthfulness, then don't be untruthful in your response and be consistent with that. Be consistent with who you are as a person, what your values are, what your beliefs are, and how you want to be treated. Try to keep that in mind when you are responding to your anger. And I think if you use those things, it really helps you guide what you would do. And you're more unlikely to do something you regret later if whatever your response is rooted in your own value system. Now, let's talk about a personal trigger situation. Maybe it's a disagreement with a friend or a family member, or seeing injustice in the media. You feel anger, but also disappointment and fear. Instead of latching out, you might notice the bodily sensations. You might just do some breathing deeply, observe what's arising, and name what's underneath. When you choose whether to speak, write, or act, do it from a place of groundedness rather than reactivity. And that's really what this is all about, being grounded in who you are as a person, your own authenticity, your own beliefs and guiding principles, and responding from that place. Because if you get more anger back, a lot of times people are taken aback when you respond in a thoughtful way, and they respond with more anger because you've touched a nerve with them about their own weaknesses or whatnot. And if you're more grounded, you can stay in your own authenticity a little bit more than if you were just reacting, and they were reacting, and then you were reacting to what they did. If you come into the response grounded in your own beliefs and authenticity, you're more likely to not say things you regret or do things you regret, but it also gives you more of the power to decide if the conversation is not going to go anywhere and being able to walk away. It really helps you walk away without feeling like shame, like, oh, they won, or whatever your old mindset might be around arguing and anger, and adopt a new mindset of that person just isn't ready to have a dialogue about this where we can come to a consensus of some kind. And therefore, I need to go away so I don't do anything I regret and wait till the whole situation simmered down a little. So, what are some common pitfalls around anger? Being consumed, letting anger define us, let it become the lens through which we see everything. The story of I'm an angry person might come to mind. Mindfulness helps us remember that we are not our anger. Our anger is an emotion that we're having right now, but you don't live there. It's not you. It's the emotion you are having. Suppression and denial, pretending anger isn't there. It tends to build up a lot of pressure and resentment. I totally am guilty of this. Suppression and denial, just stuff it down. Don't be angry about it. I did this for a really long time when I was sexually assaulted as a child. I just pushed it down, push it down, push it down. Every time the anger would come back up again about it throughout my life, I would just push it down, push it down. And it builds up a lot of resentment and pressure around certain things. And even if it's not the person, if they represent something about a situation that happened, then you tend to have less capacity for that person's mistakes, if that makes any sense. Shame and judgment are a place you can find yourself in, feeling bad for being angry, thinking anger means you're flawed, the shame that often closes down the possibility for transformation. So, so true. I did this all the time. I was about to say I was another victim of this, but not really. I did it to myself. Of just thinking that there was something wrong with me if I was angry and that I had a lot of shame around it. And a lot of that really stopped me from any kind of transformational work. And then, of course, there's acting without clarity. We all do this. Acting in anger can lead to harm, unintended consequences. And as we said, putting that space in between your emotion and your actions can give you time to discern what is the best approach. So let's do a short guided practice together, and you can follow along to meet your anger with mindfulness. Even if you aren't feeling very angry right now, which I hope you aren't, this works when you want to prepare your mind so that when anger comes, you have the tools. So find a posture that makes you feel grounded and relaxed. Just sit comfortably. You can close your eyes if you want, if that feels okay. You can take a few deep breaths just to settle. I do this all the time throughout the day. If I'm start to feel the anxiety coming up, I just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And I do that a couple of times, and you would be surprised at how settling it is. So do that, find a place where you feel comfortable. Take a few breaths just to settle your mind. Bring your mind to a mild situation where you felt some anger or perturbedness recently. Maybe someone said something hurtful. Maybe you witnessed an injustice. Maybe something didn't go as expected. Maybe it was something on your news feed. Just bring to mind something where you felt some anger recently. Allow the memory and the feeling to come into awareness. Let the anger arise, naming it quietly. Anger is here. Notice in your body where you feel it. Is it in your chest, in your abdomen, in your throat? Do you feel hot or tension or clenched fists? Just observe without pushing it away. Just let it be there. Notice the thoughts that accompany it about the other, about yourself, about what should or shouldn't be done. Can you observe them as thoughts rather than facts? Can you see them floating by like leaves on a stream? They're just your thoughts. They aren't facts. Ask gently, what's under this anger? What else do I feel? Is it helplessness, grief, fear, disappointment? Let those things arise, naming them if you can. Oh, this is fear. Oh, this is hurt. Oh, this is loss. Take a few more slow and deep breaths. Let the sensation soften if it will. Let the space open. Not to get rid of it, but to create some space so that you have a choice. When you feel ready, perhaps you can mentally or even think aloud of a small step you might take next time this arises. Maybe it's reaching out or speaking or writing, doing something constructive. And once again, a few deep breaths and gently allow your awareness to settle. And when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes, move around a little. And I want to thank you for allowing yourself this moment of attention. Even if you didn't fully participate because we sort of rushed through it, I wanted you to have these components, to have this for what to do. So take a moment when something makes you angry, if you can, just take a moment to ground yourself with a few breaths and allow it to be there and name it. Anger is here. Frustration is here. Embarrassment is here. Whatever it is, just name it and notice where it is in your body. Notice the thought that's accompanying that fear or anger, sadness, whatever it is. Notice the thoughts that are there too. And try to observe them as just thoughts, not facts. Like, as I said, leaves floating down a stream or clouds floating in the sky. And then ask yourself, what's under the anger? What else do I feel? Helplessness, grief, fear, disappointment? And name them to yourself. And then take a few more breaths and let the sensation soften if it will. Let it open. Not to get rid of your feelings or the situation, but to create a space for a choice, what you're going to do next. And you might sit with this for a little while because a choice is not so obvious. Sometimes my choice in this situation is I'm going to sleep on it. I'm going to take a few days. Decide what you need to do, what's best for you, so that you can respond, if you choose to respond, in a way that is in line with your authenticity and your core beliefs. And do some journaling if you can about it. It helps to write down the notes because sometimes anger brings up so much fear, we can't even think straight, and we don't remember all the things that have happened or that we thought of during this brief meditation, shall we say. So here are a few big takeaways from all of this. Anger isn't something to eradicate or feel guilty about. It's an important emotion and it has a purpose. It signals what you care about, what boundaries matter, what injustices sting us. Mindfulness gives us the ability to see anger without being overwhelmed, to hold it with clarity. Under anger often lies feelings of grief, fear, helplessness, despair, embarrassment. Recognizing them gives more understanding and compassion to ourselves and others, and can lead to a wiser action in the end. You will be surprised how, if you look underneath your grief and you see helplessness, how you will also see that in the other person. And just being able to find some compassion for the other person, it's not always possible. I'm not saying you have to do that, but if you can for some reason, like say your child makes you infuriated and you can find a little bit of compassion for them, it can help you come to the situation with a clearer focus and kinder words. Small steps count. You don't need to fix everything all at once. Even one aligned action in the moment of clarity is meaningful. You don't need to come up with a plan to solve the whole thing. Often, things you get angry about are a process. And be okay with it. Self-compassion and community matter. We cannot sustainably sit with big emotions alone. So seek community, seek support when you need it. In Real Change, Sharon Salzberg is explicit that mindfulness is not a retreat from the world, nor a nice accessory to activism. It's foundational. She shows how transformation in ourselves ripples out to the world with clarity, compassion, courage, and action. If we can model this behavior, we can help others model this behavior, and it's catching. It will flow out like a river farther than you imagine. It's a foundational way of coming to anger. When we engage with anger mindfully, it becomes a resource. It helps us stay awake. It helps us speak truth. It helps us persist when things are hard. Not burned out, not acting out of bitterness, not acting out of just response, but acting with integrity, with awareness, and with heart, which is so important if you want to be heard. How many times have you heard an angry person, really? And if you do the same thing back, you're not being heard very well either. But if you come to the situation from a different angle, oftentimes you'll be more heard than you realize. When we engage with anger mindfully, it becomes a resource. And I think that's really important to remember, to change your relationship to anger as a resource. It helps you stay awake. It helps you speak the truth. It helps you know who you are. So in closing, my dear friends, thank you for listening. I so appreciate each and every one of you. It's been such a wonderful journey doing this podcast, and I thank you all for your support. You mean so much to me. If today's episode stirred something in you, anger, curiosity, or something else, I hope you might give yourself some space to sit with it and breathe and just be with it. And if you think this episode might be valuable for someone else, please share it. Please like and subscribe so other folks can see it too. That really helps widen the audience, which is so important because I am just me here at I Care About You, and I am pretty grassroots. So if you share the podcast or you like and subscribe, you widen the reach, which is really important. And leave a comment or email me a comment. There'll be links in the description for how to get a hold of me, and you can chat with me about things. Hope you will if you need to. I mean, is there a time you felt anger lead you to something meaningful? I'd really love to know. Those stories are so helpful, and they help the community. As I always say, I Care About You is a community, and we help one another. So if you have ever had an experience where anger led you to something meaningful, please write it in the comments if you're listening in a space that would allow you to do that, or send me the comments and I will share it in the newsletter and whatnot. It would be really important because we're all in this together. We're all navigating this world together, and we all need to support one another. So until next time, my dear friend, know that I love you, know that I support you, and I care about you, and all the feelings that make you human. So until next time, dear friend, take care.